What's up, weebs, and welcome back to Anime Lane, the podcast where we take you down the yellow brick road of anime and have a look at everything it has to offer. I'm your host, Notorious, and I am once again doing a solo episode. Sort of continuing on from my last one, where I'm going to be talking about Legends of the Galactic Heroes, the Neue These Season 2. I'm not pronouncing the German version again. And for now, as I'm recording this, that's all I'm really going to be talking about. But I have just been to see the new Dragon Ball movie, Dragon Ball Superhero. So that will be attached to the title, just because I'm going to talk about it a little bit. But I just want people coming in knowing there's maybe light spoilers. I'm conscious of talking about something that's, even when this comes out like a month after it's been in cinemas, because this probably isn't coming out until the end of September. I'm conscious of talking about something that's probably not on home media even at that point, because we probably won't get that until like maybe spring next year if we're lucky. So yeah, I guess I'll just start with Superhero then. It was a very fun movie. So I went to see it in the cinema, of course, because it's just released in the UK today, which is the 17th of August. Weirdly, Crunchyroll kept sending me emails saying it was coming out on the 19th. So I don't know if that's a US thing, but it's definitely out here, like on the Wednesday, which kind of married up great for my, usual solo recording day. So yeah, Dragon Ball Superhero. One more super than it needs. Gonna be honest, they could have just called it a Dragon Ball movie. Dragon Ball Superhero. That would have been cool, especially given the very kind of like this film finds its root in the Kid Goku era of Dragon Ball. So like the Dragon Ball part of Dragon Ball. Because for anyone kind of unfamiliar with Dragon Ball, you have in the manga, the original manga, it was all just Dragon Ball. There was no distinction until Dragon Ball Super, which came out like 20-30 years after the original manga ended. But when it came to adapting the anime, they adapted the Kid Goku era as Dragon Ball, and then when Goku became an adult, it switched to Dragon Ball Z. So that's kind of the brief history of Dragon Ball, because I'm not going to get into that. Like I said, I'm not focusing too much on Superhero, because like I said, spoilers, and people probably wouldn't have had a massive chance to see it yet, because I don't know what the UK run is right now. I don't know how long they're going to be running it for, and how readily available it will be to go see in the cinema compared to something like Top Gun or a Marvel movie. But even then, if I was seeing a Marvel movie the day it came out, I also wouldn't be talking about spoilers straight up. So just before I kind of really fully dive into it, I am recording on a different setup. So if I sound odd, it's because I'm recording on my PC setup. Normally I'm sitting at my table downstairs with the full mixer set up, the microphone and everything like that. But right now I'm using my PC setup, which is the same kind of microphone we use for the podcast. I mean, it literally is my podcast mic, wired through an audio interface into my PC, which means I have significantly less control over how it sounds. All I have is volume control. By volume control, I mean my gain. So I'm kind of just having to watch levels go up and down on my screen as I speak. I have no control over how it sounds, so I'm going to have to I may do post-process on this, so if it sounds odd, I apologise. I just didn't want to set up all the equipment tonight. Yeah, so Dragon Ball Superhero, I'm just going to ditch one of the supers. Very fun. Like, I do this with, like, every movie, is, like, when I want to see something, I'll, like, avoid as much of the marketing as possible. So going into it, and I don't even know if they gave this away in the marketing, is how connected it is to the very early parts of Dragon Ball when Goku was a kid, and all the kind of Red Ribbon stuff, because they're kind of like the main antagonistic force again, in a sense. That's not too much of a spoiler, really. it does kind of go back to the Android arc as well. But there's a lot of it kind of hyper focused, not hyper focused, but like it, you know, takes it pays nice honor and homage and acknowledgement to an era of Dragon Ball that a lot of people don't speak about very much anymore. Or like, you know, distributors don't put as much focus on nowadays, you know, especially at least in the kind of Anglosphere, the English speaking world. You know, America and like the UK, it's all very much Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, Dragon Ball whatever the fuck's coming out right now, the 500th re-release of Dragon Ball Z, that all that sort of stuff. It sounds like I don't like Dragon Ball like Z or Super or whatever, but I do. Dragon Ball is very much a foundation of my childhood, especially the Z era. You know, that was what was on TV. That was all the kind of games me and my friends were playing growing up. But like when I adore the original Dragon Ball as well. I didn't watch that until I was like 18, but I fell in love with that era of Dragon Ball. So it's nice to see a movie that acknowledges that again. And I guess a light spoiler for this is that it surprisingly doesn't focus much at all on Goku or Vegeta. Like they're in the movie a little bit, but they're not the main characters this time. The main character of this movie is very much actually Piccolo, which, you know, kind of took me by surprise, but I was very happy with that. It's a nice change. It's very refreshing. And it's nice to see a character who, even though he's a main character, doesn't get like a massive amount of focus in any of the story arcs. At least in the anime, I don't know where the Super manga is at this point, if that's maybe focusing on other characters, but every time I see a notification from the Shonen Jump app talking about it, it's usually Goku or Vegeta, because it's always about them. This, you know, they're the popular ones, they're the front and center characters. But this one is very much focused on everyone else. It removes Goku and Vegeta, and by extension Beerus and Whis, because like they're kind of connected to Goku and Vegeta at this point. And they kind of come as a package deal. You can have Goku and Vegeta without Beerus and Whis, but you can't have Beerus and Whis without Goku and Vegeta for the most part. At least that's how the movies kind of view it a little bit. So yeah, that was sorry, because I went to see it in the cinema, I couldn't take notes, so I'm kind of I'm trying to remember the things that I picked up on when I was watching it to discuss. And like I says, I don't want to go into too much detail. So yeah, the great thing about the movie is that it kind of focuses on all the other characters, and so it's not really like the normal formula for Dragon Ball is that people or the characters, it's like they'll try their best in a fight, but they always have Goku as a fallback. And it's not Goku and Vegeta, it's always Goku. Even if Vegeta's involved, he's the strongest person in any situation that involves the other characters until Goku shows up. And so it's usually everyone's waiting on Goku to step in. And this one kind of entirely removed Goku and Vegeta, and so it's more about the characters figuring it out on their own and dealing with the situation with the abilities they have at their disposal. And that was great, because it meant there was more focus. Like I said, Piccolo's very much the main character of this movie. And it also means that Gohan gets a lot of kind of attention in this movie. He's not got as much screen time as Piccolo for like a kind of... It deals with his current character, like where his character is at right now within the Dragon Ball franchise. And that's nice because, yeah, I feel like Gohan's never had like a really great storyline, like even in Super, because it was going on during the Tournament of Power stuff, it felt a bit undercooked. I feel like Gohan has just always been done dirty, mainly because, you know, back when the Cell saga ended in the manga originally, Akira Toriyama, the original author of Dragon Ball, wanted to end the series, but it was massively popular, so Shueisha, who own Weekly Shonen Jump as well as a bunch of other shonen magazines, wanted it to continue, and so Toriyama's idea after that was to have Gohan become the main character, but that didn't quite go according to plan. Everyone wanted Goku back, and so an interesting storyline that could have been with Gohan never came to fruition, and we ended up with the Majin Buu storyline, which isn't a particular favourite of mine, I must admit. So yeah, I don't think there's anything I can... Oh, I guess I can talk about the animation, because a big thing about this movie is that it's the first... I think it's the first anyway, predominantly 3D CG Dragon Ball movie. This has become a kind of recurring thing for anime franchises recently. There's been a few other franchises that have taken this kind of, like, and one of their movies they've fully gone 3D CG with it. Like, I know, is it Doraemon? I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce it. I think that had 2 3D CG movies. I believe they were called Stand By Me. I think they're on Netflix at this point. You know, you had Lupin, and you had One Piece. Actually, this isn't even recent. This was like a while ago. This was movie, I believe, 11 was a 3D CG movie that never made it to the West. It was like a 40-minute thing that kind of just experimented with the like 3D CG, like One Piece as a thing. So yeah, it looks great. It's not the first time that Dragon Ball has included 3D CG. The Broly movie had some like cuts in there that were CG. This was something like when I originally watched Broly, and every time I watch it again, I wonder if they used the Fighter Z engine, because it looks like very similar in that movie. This one, it looks great. And I think it's less jarring because Dragon Ball has a history of using 3D CG cutscenes in its games. Like, Dragon Ball's a massive franchise, so there's like tons of video games, like just an incalculable amount that I'm not even gonna look up right now. And I've played a lot of them, from the PS2 up to the current gen. Not that there's an actual native current gen Dragon Ball game yet. Please give me Xenoverse 3. Please give me Xenoverse 3. I just want another Xenoverse game. Anyway, so I'm very used to 3D CG Dragon Ball and kind of that cel-shaded look that those games all have. But this one is extremely competent because it looks great and stylistically matches the current era of Dragon Ball, from like Battle of Gods up till now, with all the content that's come out. Broly stylistically kind of stands on its own. It's got its own kind of look and vibe to it. But when it comes to Battle of Gods, Resurrection F, Super, those all have like a new look to them that updated Dragon Ball to the modern era. And like, Super Hero takes that and almost merges it with the original look and feel of like the Cell animated stuff, you know, like GT, Z, and Dragon Ball. Not quite the same, but I'd say it looks slightly better than Super and Battle of Gods and Resurrection F, oddly enough. It feels slightly more true to Dragon Ball style than those do. And what was odd is, like, there's a couple of, like, flashbacks to, you know, original Dragon Ball era, Z, and seeing those, like, completely reanimated in a modern style, and, like, those are the only parts of the movie that are, like, hand-drawn animation, so, like, 2D and not 3D CG, and those look great. I really want, like, just a full reanimation project of Dragon Ball, going from the very beginning, chapter 1 of the manga, Kid Goku, all the way through to the end of Z. It's something that I think the franchise could actually benefit from a lot. It would give the Kid Goku era a new lease of life. It would mean that Z finally gets the canon adaptation that it really needs. Because, you know, they tried Dragon Ball Kai, or Z Kai, as I guess as it's known here in the West, where they like edited Z down to just the canon material. But because the film is in so bad a state, that means that some stuff was reanimated and it looked horrific. So yeah, I think looking at the style they picked for those scenes in this movie, absolutely want a full reanimation project for for Dragon Ball, the original manga, in that style. That would be amazing. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there for Super. It was fun. I love the change of pace for focusing on other characters. And yeah, that's the most I can say without getting into any spoilers, I think. So yeah, I'm just going to move on to Legends of the Galactic Heroes, the New Thesis. Season 2. So I obviously, in my last episode that I did on my own, I spoke about Legends of the Galactic Heroes, the New Thesis, Season 1. God damn, it's a lengthy title. So yeah, this was a great season. Like, god damn, this show continues just to get better and better. One thing I did notice at the beginning, so I actually have notes for this one this time. Last time I was working totally without any notes, so I apologise for how that discussion ended up. So jumping straight into Season 2, I noticed that Season 1 kind of ended in a bit of an odd place, because episode 1 of Season 2 just wraps up the very end of, like, Season 1 straight away. Like, it ended on a cliffhanger for them they were going to retreat, and then they had to like go to Armistar, I believe it's called, and that was where they were going to fight the Imperial forces before they could leave the Imperial, like, zone back to Alliance territory. And the first episode just, like, totally wraps it all up. And I get that if this was a movie, like, if Season 1 was also a movie run in Japan, then having a cliffhanger makes sense. But god, I wish they had just wrapped that up so that we could go straight into the story in Season 1. It may have meant that Season 1 was 13 episodes, but I would have been cool with that. One extra episode isn't much of an issue for me. It was, and then, you know, during that, we see that Reinhard kind of finally has a chink in his armor when he faces Yang again, and then Yang escapes again, and that kind of very much annoys him. And then after that we get into the main story of Season 2 with the death of Friedrich IV, the current emperor of the Galactic Empire. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I keep forgetting what they're actually called. Yeah, that totally caught me off guard, because it, like, throws just the entire trajectory of the story on a different line. Because it means that instead of moving at a steady pace towards Reinhard's goal and a will he, won't he, you know, will he get enough allies, will he tell someone that eventually rats him out, it gives him an opportunity to just grab onto power, and he takes that, so, like, he just grabs it fully, and plays it fully to his advantage, and that was great. That was a great turn of events that made this season really interesting, because it plunged the Galactic Empire into a full-on civil war. And because they were experiencing a civil war, Reinhard then set it up so that the Alliance would also fall into its own mini civil war. And of course, I'd be remiss. Sorry, so if this discussion seems a little kind of frantic and all over the place, it's because I'm scrolling through my notes, which are based on, like, each episode as I watched it. And so I just have here absolute banger of an ending from Sawano again, because that would have been the end of the first episode, I guess. Yeah, I don't think I mentioned the opening in season 1. It's a track called Binary Star by Sawano, and I believe it is sang by URU. It's an absolutely fantastic song. I mean, I discussed this in the music episode of Nat, but Sawano is one of my favourite artists and soundtrack composers in the anime industry. And so you also have the the ED, or the ending, sorry, for season 1, I don't think was by Sawano. I don't remember the name of the song, and I can't remember who sang it, unfortunately. But then the ending of season 2 is another Sawano track called Tranquility, featuring Anli. And that is a great song. Just a great ending. It really captures the vibe, much like Binary Star captures the vibe as well. Yeah, and then we kind of find out that Rubinsky, he has his own agenda, but he's also tied to the Earth cultists, who don't really come up a lot in season 1. They come up a couple of times here in season 2, and I think they're going to become more prominent. Maybe not in season 3, going by episode titles, but maybe going into season 4. They have a whole thing going on. Then we actually had a meeting of Kirk Heiss and Yang in person. I liked that. That was cool, because they meet and they get along. They kind of see the honourable, like, person that each other is, and that's cool. And everyone kind of on Yang's team likes him as well. It presents a likeable figure in the Galactic Empire for them, a reasonable person that they think could possibly, mean that later down the line they can maybe negotiate a peace treaty or something like that. And that, unfortunately, can never be now, because Kirk Heiss fucking dies. And that caught me way off guard, so I'm jumping way to the end now, but I cannot not talk about this until later. I could not believe that they killed Kirk Heiss. Like, that is Reinhardt's rock. He is the thing holding Reinhardt together and from going off the rails most of the time. So what the hell's going to happen when he's not there? Like, oh my god. And it's entirely because of Oberstein, who I'm not sure if I talked about in season 1, but I just do not like him. He has not done anything wrong, per se, because even though he did something that led to Kirk Heiss's death, it wasn't a wrong decision, per se. But I just do not like this man whatsoever. Something about him, I just dislike him. Especially the way he tries to kind of worm into Reinhardt's, like, thinking process and kind of try and control the decisions that he makes. And like I said, without Kirk Heiss, that's gonna be an issue, I think. But yeah, no, that totally caught me off guard, because I thought, Kirk Heiss, he's a secondary main character. He's Reinhardt's best friend. He's gonna be there until the end, and then no, he dies. And seeing Reinhardt go to his gravestone, and it's literally just engraved with "my friend" above as like the epitaph. Oh, that hurt. Oh, that really hurt. So yeah, jumping back to my notes. Yeah, a lot of this is coming from, like, the setup of the coup d'etat going on, and how there's, like, unrest in both sides, which I just mentioned. And then we have Falk, who joins the coup. I did not mention him in the first episode, and I meant to, because this guy, he was a total prick. So he's the main reason, sort of, that they go into Imperial territory at the end of season 1. And he kind of controls the decisions, and he blocks, like, the request from the frontline fleets for retreat. And then he's he's challenged by one of the people on the front line and like totally loses it. And he is insane. Like, he is just insane. And so he just joins the coup because he feels slighted. And then he like kills a higher up admiral person. I think it's the chief of staff. And basically triggers the coup. So yeah, he is a total asshole. Yeah, the Civil War was cool because it meant that you got to see some kind of close quarters fighting with mainly in the Empire, when like they're gonna take like a base similar to Isla Horn. I forget its name. But Mittermeier, and Roenthal. Oh, Rentenberg Fortress. I did write the name down. Yeah, when they're storming that, we get to see kind of some like close quarters combats where they have like these kind of mech suit type things that are like kind of like Iron Man, but not as humanoid when people are wearing them. Very. That was cool. That was very nice to see. And during that it led to Reinhard speaking to the kind of person in charge of Rentenberg Fortress of Lesser, who insulted his sister, and basically Reinhard set it up so that he would look like a traitor to his side of his faction in the Civil War. That was a very nice piece of underhandedness from Reinhard there. Yeah, that was another thing I picked up on in this season, is that the kind of religious foundation of the Galactic Empire is very much based on Norse mythology. I didn't really like, the capital's called Odin, and that, I mean, fair, but I didn't realize that like Odin's like their god, and it's like their full foundation for their religion. Because like they kind of mention, you know, going to Odin and death and Valhalla and stuff like that. So yeah, I found that interesting. You know, I thought it was, I shouldn't be surprised, you know, mainly Germanic influences for the Galactic Empire. So yeah, that was just a neat little thing that I picked up on. Oh, and then Jessica died. So Jessica was, again, I don't think I brought her up because my coverage of season 1 was not the best. Jessica is basically Yang and his friend, whose name I've forgotten. She was actually engaged to Yang's friend, who dies in the first couple episodes of season 1. And she becomes like a prominent anti-war political figure. And during the coup, when the what are they called? The National Salvation Military Council are kind of like being a police, making everything kind of like a police state. She's organizing like a peaceful rally, and things get out of hand, and she gets killed. That was very sad. Again, she was another character who felt like she could have been a reasonable voice in the room, because once the coup is dismantled, the previous government are reinstated, and like it's just straight back to all their underhandedness, their corrupt political, you know, maneuvering and stuff like that. But it's one of those other things that, like, as I explained that situation of, like, you know, when the coup's going on and the police state, and she becomes like an anti-war activist who runs for office and stuff like that, it just, you know, reinforces how amazing the world building is of this series, because you're not just there for, you know, Yang and Reinhard and their journeys. It's like, it's all the other characters that are involved as well. And, you know, you care for them, you know, you care for Kirk Heiss, you kind of cared for Jessica, even though she wasn't in it a lot, but you wanted the best for her, you wanted to see her, you know, get into office and actually shake up, you know, the political system. And it's you know, this kind of like throwing you these left turns to kind of put you in a position of like, well, what the hell's going to happen here? What road are we going to go down? Because it looks like all the best options are being slowly closed off. And then you have in the in the noble faction of the Galactic Empire. So when the Emperor dies, and they're looking for they're deciding on who the new Emperor will be, because he doesn't have an actual son. He only has like a grandson, and like 2 nieces or something like that, who aren't like blood related, or from like married in or something like that. And so when Reinhard sponsors the grandson or great grandson or something like that, it basically splits the Galactic Empire's military in two. It splits it into everyone siding with Reinhard, who are mostly low-born people who have risen up the ranks in the military, and the nobles, who just want the status quo, who just want to be nobles. You know, I'm pretty sure anyone who has read anything about a monarchy, anything about this sort of kind of ruling system, knows what I mean. And anyone who's looked into like the kind of Tsar and like Russian kind of wars and stuff, it's not identical, but it does take some inspiration from this, which shouldn't be surprising. Yoshiki Tanaka bases a lot of his, well, I say a lot, he only wrote 2 series as far as I'm aware. Both are very much based in actual history, and things that happened. Obviously, Legend of the Galactic Heroes doesn't, neither actually take course of like actually adapting history into a story, but it uses that as a foundation to build upon an interesting and very rich story. And so when they split, you have the nobles who are, wherever they are. It's not Rentenberg Fortress, but they're in another fortress, kind of like, again, Islahorn. And so you have the nephew of Braunschweig, who's like the co-leader. There is another one, but he kind of dies very early on, and I can't remember his name. But Braunschweig has a nephew called Flegel, who is just ready to kill himself at any given moment. And like, so are all the young nobles who are obviously on the noble side. Like any time it comes up that, like, something's gone wrong and they feel responsible, it's like they just instantly pull out their guns and they're ready to kill themselves. And it's like, Jesus, settle down, please. And then here's one of my main sticking points for Oberstein. And I said he didn't do anything wrong, but he kind of actually did. I didn't like him from the moment he was like introduced as someone who would be siding with Reinhard, because there was just something about him that was off. But then he encouraged Reinhard to not stop a nuclear attack on a colony. So in a fit of rage, because he's losing and his own people are rebelling against him on his planet, Braunschweig decides to just nuke it and start over. Now, he's advised against this by the sane person in the room, who's his aide or whatever. But there's only so much he can do, and he can't talk him down, and so he goes ahead. He's going to go ahead with it, and Reinhard initially wants to stop it, but Oberstein advises him not to, so that they can record it and show the people, so they can show that this is the corruption of the nobles. So essentially, Braunschweig commits a war crime. Reinhard knows about it and just lets it happen. This becomes, and Kirkheist does not like this decision, obviously, and he goes to speak to Reinhard about it, but Reinhard just doesn't listen to him. I mean, Kirkheist can't talk to him until after it, because they're in different battlefields, they're on different campaigns. And so it's not until after it's all happened and they meet up again that Kirkheist very much makes it vocal that he was not happy about Reinhard not doing anything about it. And then, yeah. Sorry, I just noticed a really long section of my notes and I'm like, why the hell did I write so much? Oh, yeah, it's the different approaches to the kind of internal conflicts, but you can kind of see, so like each side of the so you have the Imperials and you have the Alliance, and each of them are kind of embroiled in their own inner conflicts during this season, and there's like different approaches because you have a full-on civil war between two different factions within the Galactic Empire, and then in the Alliance you have a coup d'etat. But there is some parallel in their thinking, such as Reinhard, like I said, recording the nuclear attack and showing it to the people so that they can destabilize the faith they have in the nobles, and Yang using Bagdash to expose the coup for being a work of Reinhard from the Galactic Empire, basically saying, it was the Galactic Empire did this to sabotage us because they're going through their own civil war. One is objectively worse than the other because Yang's just using information that he has at hand, because Bagdash is a turncoat. He's originally part of the coup, but when he meets Yang, he decides to flip because he realizes that Yang is the one that can basically take back the situation, and what the coup was wrong. To kind of put it lightly, everyone kind of still is side-eyeing him a little bit, like, are you going to do something? Because he's a bit odd. And then there's more seeds being sown with the Dominion of Fezzen during this season as well. Like I said, Rubinsky, who runs the place, is tied to the Earth cult, although he still has his own agenda, it seems. The Earth cult was interesting this season because it turns out that they've influenced the leader, is it Prime Minister of the Free Alliance? I forget what the actual title is. Of the Free Planets Alliance, Trunick. He now seems to be an Earth cultist, and Earth cultists in the Galactic Heroes mythos are people who still worship Earth as because that's the original home of humans, and they want to recolonize it. The problem is that Earth is still devastated by pollution and just, natural decay over time, because I think by the looks of it here, it's slightly closer to the sun now. So it's, it's drying up and stuff like that. And then we have our first defection in this season. I would have expected like someone to do this. I guess actually technically we've had two this season, one to each side. Because at the end of the season, Merkatz, who was originally like the I think Reinhard initially took over his position before he seized power, and Merkatz ended up being on the side of the nobles. But when things started going wrong, he was their kind of like military advisor. He was the person meant to be running the military side of things, but Braunschweig didn't listen to him, and so Merkatz realised that the situation was beyond saving. He didn't want to submit to Reinhard, so he turned to the Free Planets Alliance, and Yang, he actually sought asylum from Yang specifically, which I thought was interesting, that Yang's reputation is that well known even in the Galactic Empire, that if people were wanting to defect, they see him as the most reasonable person and the most welcoming person to go to. Yang happily takes him in. And so I hope he becomes part of Yang's fleet. I think that will be an interesting character dynamic, someone who was staunchly Imperial now being part of the Free Planets Alliance, and becoming one of Yang's kind of core team. That would be interesting, yeah. Braunschweig's death was a very intense moment. And just going back to like kind of the whole kind of fall of the nobles, I guess, the fall of the Goldenbaum dynasty. He kind of sees the end is coming, and he's like, well, shit, I guess I should take my own life to save some of my honor, because that seems to be a very big thing for the nobles here. If they disgrace themselves, or if they're if they can't valiantly die in battle, they have to kill themselves to save some face, which is, I find, fascinating in and of itself. But he is such a coward that he can't bring himself to do it. And when he's offered like a glass of wine that would make it painless and stuff like that, he's still too cowardly to drink it. And so like you have his main aide and 2 guards like fully just restrain him, while the aide like forces him to drink the wine. It's just an intense moment. It's weird because you kind of think in that moment that the aide has betrayed Braunschweig, but then he's the one that ends up killing Kirkheis in an attempt to kill Reinhard, because he brings in Braunschweig's body in like a coffin unit thing, kind of sci-fi one, but he had like a rocket launcher in it, and so he takes it out and tries to kill Reinhard with it, but Kirkheis steps in, knocks the shot off course, but it turns out that the aide had a ring that apparently can fire laser beams and shot Kirkheis, which led to his death. But yeah, and a very intense moment from Braunschweig, which I was surprised by, because like while he's, you know, the main antagonist for Reinhard this season, he wasn't too much of an interesting character beyond, you know, committing a war crime. And that was kind of his only interesting moment, where it's like, oh, you are so far gone. But I can't believe that we got to that point before anything interesting was to happen with him. The people who were around him, the other nobles that kind of supported him, they were more interesting. I guess they only really supported him and made him the kind of co-leader, even though the other leader died very early on, because like they had some sort of legitimate claim to the throne. And then we have kind of the fallout of Kirkheis's death later, after that, where like Reinhard is kind of fallen very much into a pit of depression, and so Oberstein like contacts his sister so that his sister can speak to him, and that leads to a very nice moment, where like you think that the sister's also kind of leaving him, but then she's like, you know, promise me you'll, you know, conquer it. She's like, I'm gonna go live in like the countryside somewhere, but you could come visit me if you get tired, but I don't want to be in a big fancy mansion. And it leads to the moment where, you know, Reinhard asks if his sister, Anne Rose, I believe, if she loved Kirkheis. And now, for anyone in the audience, it was extremely obvious. Yes, she did love Kirkheis, and Kirkheis loved her. Their situations meant that they couldn't really express such, because, you know, Anne Rose was taken by the Emperor to be one of his mistresses or his wife or whatever. And, you know, probably Kirkheis out of respect for Reinhard, and, you know, for respect to Anne Rose, because the Emperor had just passed away, but mainly probably out of respect to Reinhard and his friendship with Reinhard, he didn't want to approach Anne, you know, in that capacity, when the opportunity became, you know, when it became an opportunity to do so. So yeah, I just thought it was, you know, an interesting thing that, like, it's very obvious that they love each other. It's very much a mutual thing, and just Reinhard apparently was just entirely oblivious to the fact. Like, he couldn't tell his best friend was madly in love with his own sister. I just find that weird. Unfortunately, yeah, I thought when Reinhard died, and it was kind of because of Oberstein and his decision, I thought that would lead to, like, a massive crack in their relationship, or that it would potentially cause Reinhard to cast Oberstein out. But no, unfortunately, he's still very much part of Reinhard's inner circle. And so I think that's going to lead him down like a massive, like a road that he's very much going to regret. Which I guess, giving the trajectory of the story, makes sense. If anyone's going to end up with a tragic ending in this, it's going to be Reinhard, just because even though both people are antagonists, he's ultimately gonna be the final antagonist, unless someone else appears and becomes the final antagonist. Because even once you remove the Earth cultists from it, once they deal with that storyline, it's gonna have to be, taking down Reinhard. As much as we you're here to see his journey for that, but ultimately what we want to see, or at least if I'm to kind of psychoanalyze this, the appeal of this is that that they're going to reach a point, and it's watching them go up to that point, but then you want to watch them fall, because they're going to become a twisted person. There's no way that Reinhard can become the emperor and not become twisted by power, and not become just another Rudolph, the original emperor of the Galactic Empire, who was not a well-liked individual. I'm not saying he's going to be the same kind of hardline, far-right, Nazi level, politics that Rudolph had. He'd probably be a bit more liberal because of his upbringing and stuff like that, but ultimately he'd still be a dictator, and he probably would, become disliked for various reasons, of course, across the story. So I'm interested in seeing that. Sorry, I just accidentally threw my phone. So yeah, I'm surprised. I thought I had more notes than that. So I did write a little summary at the end there. I jumped around a little and ignored some of my notes, mainly because I ended up talking about some of them just in natural kind of progression. So yeah, I'll just read kind of the summary of it. So, great season. The parallel storyline continues to be just as strong as the first season, and it really makes Kirk Heiss's death much more impactful, because that Yang has had a relatively easy time taking down the National Salvation Military Council, and he knew, he lost Jessica, because she was killed during the coup, but it doesn't have the same. I don't think it'll have the same deep impact as Reinhard losing Kirk Heiss, and how Reinhard loses Kirk Heiss, how Reinhard losing Kirk Heiss affects his decision making going into the next season and beyond. That's going to be extremely interesting, and I hope it leads to a breakdown in his relationship with Oberstein over time. So yeah, that's that is Legend of the Galactic Heroes, the new season. It was also Dragon Ball Superhero. Like I said, I don't want to get into that a lot just yet, because I'm aware, it's a cinema. It's just in cinemas. It won't be out on home video, like I said, until spring next year, if we're lucky. Possibly, the latter half of next year. So yeah, that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Of course, I'll be talking about Season 3 at some point as I watch that. And I'm not entirely sure what I'll be talking about along with it, because I'm kind of just talking about stuff that I'm, watching at the moment. And the only other thing outside of seasonals that I'm watching alongside Legends of the Galactic Heroes is Free. But I don't want to talk about that just yet, because I'm rewatching Free in preparation for seeing the Final Stroke movies, which come out as I'm recording this in a couple of weeks, but as this episode comes out, they'll have been out and I'll have been to see it. But I don't want to talk about Free until I can talk about it with the Final Stroke being out on home video, just because I won't be able to take notes, and it's a double billing of both movies, so it'll be 3 hours, so trying to retain all the information. I wouldn't be able to do an episode on it on its own, especially because it's a limited time thing in the UK. It doesn't currently have any announcement for the US, and God knows when it'll come out in home media. So as it stands, I won't be talking about Free until I can talk about all of them in succession, going from Season 1, Eternal Summer, High Speed, Take Your Marks, Dive to the Future, and the Final Stroke. So until Final Stroke comes out in home video, I won't be talking about that. So I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about next time alongside Legends of the Galactic Heroes. It might just be a Galactic Heroes on its own, but we'll see. I'm gonna stop rambling, because if I don't have anyone to kind of bounce off of, I tend to ramble at the end. So yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you'll tune in next time, and goodbye.